Hi, guys. Welcome to the Marketing Rizz Podcast. I am your host, Crispino, and today we are joined by Matt Woodard from Melbourne, Australia. Matt is the founder of Scalr. For 20 years, Matt has worked in talent acquisition, partnering with brands like Xero, Zendesk, and Slalom Build to build and optimize TA functions from the ground up. So, in this podcast, we are going to talk about hiring the best talent in 2026, hiring frameworks, the impact of AI on recruitment, and much more. So, welcome to the show, Matt. It is great to have you here with us.
Thank you so much, Chris. Lovely to be here.
Lovely. Thank you. I miss Melbourne, so it's really great to have a guest from Melbourne on the podcast. And yeah, as you told me, the weather is amazing. So I love those sunny days in Melbourne.
It's been a glorious day today. We've caught the end of the summer, the best of the summer weather. So no, I've been making the most of it.
Absolutely, yeah. And yes, before the winter, do make the most of it, because the winter sometimes in Melbourne goes crazy, right?
It really does. It does. It's 4 seasons in one day in Melbourne, unfortunately.
Yes.
Sometimes. Yeah.
I remember it used to be sunny, but I used to take an umbrella and head out to uni in the morning, because you never know. And I would have to use it by the end of the day. So that's Melbourne for you.
It really is.
Yeah. So to get started, Matt, could you give us a quick rundown into what you do, a bit of your experience, and what kind of clients do you work with?
Sure. Well, you gave a great summary to start with, but yes, I've been in talent acquisition recruitment for about 20 years now. It explains, in my mind, all the grey hairs that I now have. But most of it started with agency recruitment, like a lot of us did, and moved into in-house roles. And when I moved over to Australia about 10 years ago, Chris, I ended up really specializing in working for fast-paced scaling tech businesses. So Zendesk, as you mentioned, Slalom Build was pretty much a startup in Australia. So when I got made redundant about 3 years ago, I decided to start my own business. So that's how Scalr was born. So the aim is really to support scaling businesses, to help them create robust internal recruitment processes and functions. So there's a lot of businesses who just do things kind of ad hoc, and because of that, they get inconsistent outcomes. So I work with businesses to help create more of a structure, to help them create something which is scalable in the longer term.
Absolutely. So, Matt, you've been doing this now for almost 20 years, 2 decades, that is. So, how have you seen the industry of recruitment evolve over time?
It's been a really interesting 20 years, really. I think when I started in agency recruitment, I think it was all very manual, and the kind of candidates that employers look for were the ones that had 5, 10, 15 years experience. They were the ones that were stable. They were the ones that really were the ones that you really wanted in your business, rather than someone who only had a couple of years. And now we fast forward to a position where we are, where the average sort of tenure for a role these days is between 18 months and 2 years. So we've really moved on quickly, and I think people realize that they have to move on quickly these days, because technology is moving so fast that their skills get left behind. So I think there's been such a huge shift in the market in the last 20 years. I think it's really been a pleasure to be part of this kind of evolution, and certainly in the last 5 years, I guess, Chris.
Yeah, I think millennials have seen almost everything, right from the very basic form of internet to now AI being introduced in most of the things that we do. And you spoke about technology there. So I'd like to ask you, how has been your experience using AI and technology in recruitment?
I think we're right at the beginning of that process. I think everybody's still at the problem. I'd say a vast majority of companies are still at the stage of understanding what it is that they want AI to do. There are some companies, probably the larger businesses in the US, the sort of more early adopters who are doing more with AI. But I think there certainly seems to be a desire to use it, but really, I think to understand a bit more about exactly what they need and why they need it, and how that's going to affect the other parts of the recruitment process. So if, for example, at the beginning of the process, top of funnel, it's screening candidates, and it's taking the administrative focus away from somebody else. What can that person do instead? Or rather, are they needed to still within the business, or actually what is that person going to do instead? More value adding pieces of the recruitment process, the candidate engagement part, the recruitment marketing part, the onboarding and retention parts, which are really critical to any recruitment process and to any organization, but can't be done by by AI.
Fair enough. That's interesting. So, Matt, what patterns do you see in companies that scale their hiring successfully?
I mean, it's a good question, Chris. The ones that scale well treat hiring as a system, not just a series of one-off decisions. So I think that's probably
Mm,
the critical thing. They define ahead of going to market, they define what good looks like and
mm,
before they open a role, not sort of working it out during the process.
mm,
They also move faster without being sloppy.
mm,
So the founders that stay involved in the culture and values piece know when to hand over the mechanics. I think that's the other thing. So consistency is key. Understanding
mm,
when to engage someone professionally to run the process for them. I think making sure that the process is the same throughout every role, throughout every single process. There's a defined process in place. You have the same scoring. You remove any opportunity for bias within the process, and you
mm,
make sure it's consistent every single time. By doing it that way, you will consistently get the right outcomes. You'll be able to measure each candidate against the
mm.
right next in a fair and equitable way. And as I said, your quality of hire will go up as a result.
Fair enough. So, since recruitment is kind of, you could say, the cornerstone of any organization, why do founders still underestimate the importance of structured hiring?
It's a really good question. So I think because early on gut feel works, because without
Mm,
a sort of defined system and process in place, gut feel works.
mm,
They sound right. They're saying the right things.
yeah.
We'll just go with that. And I think the first, in a startup, the first 5 hires generally are people people who have the sort of
Mm,
similar shared energy and people you just get on with.
true,
So
true, yeah.
therefore they're a natural fit. So I think they build a false confidence that they're good at hiring. Well, I hired all these people,
Uh,
therefore I know what I'm doing. I think when they
mm,
scale, they're bringing people that they don't know. They use the same sort of gut feel approach,
mm,
and it starts failing. So I guess by the time they realized it, they've made 2 or 3 bad hires, and that has a really big effect on culture. The impact of one bad hire in 100 people is far less than one bad hire in 10 people.
fair enough. So, at what point or stage of growth should an entrepreneur or company build a formal talent acquisition system?
I think the honest answer, Chris, is probably earlier than most people think. I'd
Mm,
say probably around 20 to 30 people, you start to feel the pain. At 50, you absolutely need someone owning it and
mm,
having that dedicated focus. I think that's really incredibly important. It doesn't have to be a full-time TA hire
mm,
straight away. I mean, there is a rise, and I'm sure the same is the case over with you in India as well, where there's a rise in fractional and embedded hiring models. That
mm,
seems to work pretty well at this stage, this kind of infancy of an organization, because it's there's uncertainty around levels of hiring. So having someone permanent in place to fill maybe 10 roles in a year just isn't financially sensible to do. So having someone in fractional who can manage ebbs and flows is really important. I think that the key is that hiring can't just be a side job for the CEO at that stage anymore.
fair enough. So, Matt, a lot of my audience who will be tuned in into this podcast are basically founders of startups scaling in the early stage. So, what are some of the common hiring mistakes you see founders making?
Yeah, I think no one is as passionate about your business as you, right? So I think
Mm,
generally founders will likely sort of gravitate towards people who are enthusiastic, who really believe in the vision and really buy into
mm,
what you're saying. So hiring for enthusiasm over capability is probably one of the critical ones. I think moving too fast because of growth pressure is the other one as well. All of a sudden we need to hire 10 people, so it's just the first 10 that come along, rather than actually having a clear
mm,
plan and strategy around exactly what those people are, or what the impact of the first hire it has on the others going into the business as well. I think writing job ads that describe a wish list rather than an actual role. I mean, we've all seen these roles. You read them and they sound too good to be true. That's because they are too good to be true, because they're not written
mm,
with a sense of sort of a real day to day reality check of what actually is happening in the business. But
mm,
I say probably the biggest one is not, I think I mentioned just there, but not having a clear scorecard before you start. So every interviewer is essentially assessing a different thing. So having clear scorecard or rubric or whatever you want to call it, to make sure that everybody is measured in the same way, regardless of who's being interviewed and who's doing the interviewing. Then you get a sort of benchmark of scores and quality that you can actually measure each candidate against and make your decisions from there.
So can you tell me a bit more about the scorecard? Because it's something new to me. I never seen one or I never worked on one. So
Yeah, I
what
think
are
just
some of the things that need to be there on the scorecard?
I think it's a clarity around exactly what is most important for the role to be successful. So what signals are you looking for within your interview that mean the candidate is likely to be successful in the role? So it's say 5 key things which are essential for this person to be successful in the role. Make sure those are sort of plotted, and then you have a bad, good, great kind of grading system that then you can match everybody, or you can plot everybody against. So even that's the most basic sort of understanding, being really crystal clear about exactly what the 3 to 5 key things are, and then making sure you tailor your questions, you structure your interviews to make sure you're getting enough evidence and signal around those things. And then by doing that, then you can measure the people accordingly from there.
So let's take an example. Like a lot of the startups I work with need a CMO. So what would be the ideal 5 parameters for a CMO on the scorecard?
I would think it'd be the same thing for most leadership roles. So it's going to be that they're able to manage manage people. I think creating strategy and direction. I think if it's a startup, it's probably a little bit of working with ambiguity. A lot of people get hired because they have excellent skills, but they're hired at the wrong stage of a journey, of a business journey. They're wanting to work in a system that's already established and tried and tested. Whereas a lot of startups are really messy because they're just working out as they go, right? So I think it's those key things are going to be critical.
Amazing. So Matt, what would you say are some of the signs that tell you a company's hiring process is broken?
Again, I think always hiring for the same role. I think that's not being, following the same process rather than so having a structure in place for the process is important, but understanding the unique intricacies of that individual role rather than just asking the same question. So making sure that your approach is tailored to each individual role. I think that's obviously critical. I think if time to fill keeps blowing out, I think that's the role. Getting people on board and really sort of not understanding why. I think hiring managers can be frustrated with candidates, but again, can't articulate why. There's no consistency in how interviews are run. Offers are rejected. I think that's a really critical thing. We're in a competitive market. I think in Australia at the moment, last year, the applications were, 2024 applications were the highest they've been in post-COVID. And the data from the most recent survey that I saw for 2025 was that it was 17% up on that. So I think in some areas, the average is over 180 applications per role in Australia. And obviously in India, much bigger market, I'm sure you're probably feeling even more so, that issue. I think if you're having candidates reject your offers when there's such a high volume of candidates in the market, it speaks to something internally within your process, right? And having that lack of consistency, is really, really poor. I mean, I've been speaking to some clients recently, and then there's enthusiasm at the beginning, and then you get ghosted for 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. I think that's the other thing. That's something we could have a whole separate podcast on, Chris, about candidate experience and how badly organizations are doing that at the moment. I think that's another critical thing. People leaving within their sort of notice, within their probation period, the first 90 days. I mean, any of those are really sort of yellow and red flags. I think multiple of those things together shows that the process is probably really broken. and really needs to be sort of surgically repaired.
Fair enough. So let's talk about culture a bit over here, Matt. So what do you think is the impact of a wrong hire on a company's culture?
Again, I think just going back to the last answer there, I think it compounds. One bad hire in a small team creates friction. It can lower standards, and it signals to your potentially high performers that you're probably not as serious about quality as you might say you are. I think they then start to feel wondering if they're valued, and you end up having your best performers leave as a result. The ones who stay can start can start to dilute their own standards. You end up with I guess then you end up with a culture that reflects your worst hiring decisions rather than your best ones. And again, it's so critical to get those first 10, 20 sort of foundational roles right, and it's worth taking a bit of extra time on them to make sure that you've really done your due diligence and you've really created the right hiring structure to ensure that you have got the right people.
I've also seen a lot of these companies scaling, startups especially, they struggle with retention. So why do you think that is, and how should a company, what guardrails should a company put in place to ensure the retention is better?
I think that's it's a really good question. I think the answer is the growth changes everything. I think there's a lot of people, myself included, actually. I've been in businesses in the past where I really enjoy being part of a small team. You feel the energy, and you feel the sense that we're all pushing. Yeah, we're all pushing in the same direction. We're all on a mission together. And then you get to sort of 100, 200 people. You stop knowing everybody's names in the office. And then then you get to 300. It becomes pretty corporate and pretty sort of enterprise level business. And then they get to that point, that 250, 300 people, where the people who are interested in being part of a startup get off because they don't want to be part of a corporate business anymore. So I think that's one key thing that I've certainly experienced. Roles can evolve faster than the people in them often as well. Some people are happy to be one of team of 5 rather than team of 20. I think that changes. Communication can break down as the business scales. The things that made it exciting when it was small, like that sort of visibility, that pace that we mentioned, direct access to leadership, all those things start disappearing as you add more layers of complexity in the business. I think companies forget that often retention is partly a hiring problem as well. So if you hire someone for a version of the job that existed 6 months ago, you're going to lose them when the job changes as well. So it's really, as I said, it's really making sure that you are, every time you hire, you're reviewing. You aren't just hiring someone for a role that you hired 6 months ago, because your business will have changed, and the needs and skills and experience and mentality of the person you need to hire 6 months later will be different to that more startup person.
Yeah. So you spoke about getting the first 10 to 20 hires really spot on, right? So what are some of the things that the founders should look at beyond resumes to make those right hires?
Yeah, I think, as we sort of touched on it earlier, enthusiasm is great to see, but I think it's really important to have values alignment as well. I think there will be a lot of twists and turns as you grow a startup. So I think values alignment over skill set can often be a big one. You can upskill someone, but you can't easily change how someone thinks or communicates or sort of handles pressure. So I think there's a lot of those things. If you've got somebody who has core skills and can be effective, but is malleable and can be sort of trained and coached along the way, I think that also is a really key thing to look for. I think I keep mentioning this, but write down the role properly. Even like a one-pager between a team forces clarity. Even having just 10 key dot points of what they're hoping to achieve, and then having a different opinion on that is critical, rather than just sort of letting a founder just run them with themselves. Even just having somebody who might have had a bit of experience hiring, or even someone like ourselves, a recruiter, or just to sort of second guess or just to challenge some assumed perceptions about what good looks like for a sort of foundational role like that. Really seek a second opinion is often a really critical thing to avoid failure in the short term.
Yeah. Absolutely. But now, so it's really interesting because there are these startups and there are large companies now. So how does a startup compete with a large company when they want to get when they're fighting for the same talent?
How do they compete?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of different reasons, a lot of different ways that they compete. I think a lot of people want to work in a startup because
Mm,
of the exposure. We've talked
mm,
about this already, but the exposure that they get in the
yeah.
business. Was it a lot of people say, a day in a startup is like a month in a corporate business. You get so much exposure. You're expected to wear
Yeah.
multiple hats all of the
Mm,
time. So you get your skills will be evolved so much more quickly. I think the
mm,
thing for startups is generally they can move more quickly as well. I think that's the key at the moment,
yeah.
where a lot of corporates are very slow and deliberate in
Mm,
their process. They'll have lots and lots of rounds. If the US
yeah.
companies often have 6 to 8 rounds,
Mm,
startups can move much more quickly, much more
more
nimbly.
nimble.
You can probably
Yeah.
yeah, you can move through a process in a matter of days versus
Yeah.
weeks or sometimes months. So I think there's that. I think you get the opportunity to own a lot more process. I think you get the chance to probably be more involved in strategic and sort of direction setting discussions than you would
Yeah.
as a member of a team. There's a whole heap
Mm,
of different things. Obviously, you take into consideration the potential risk around being in the startup environment, but I think there are, for someone who with the right sort of appetite and the right attitude to that, I think there's huge upside to working in sort of startup and scaling business and being part of something that might end up being a unicorn or really successful business. How exciting
yeah.
is that in terms of being able to upskill yourself and actually learn so much on the way?
Yeah, I think it's directly proportionate. The risk is much more higher working with a startup, but the reward as well could be tenfolds as compared to working in a boring corporate job. And
Yeah,
also the growth on paper in a startup, if you perform, I think you get it directly, and you can see the proportion growth where you grow in stature and you grow with the team size, your responsibilities. So I think that is definitely more lucrative, and founders should do or take more efforts to kind of promote this aspect about working with a startup as compared to working with a big corporate or something.
totally agree. Yeah.
So yeah, uh, yeah. So what's your take, Matt, on outsourcing to countries, especially like India and Philippines? What's like your 2 cents on that?
I guess the cost of hiring is going
Mm,
up. Certainly in Australia, and I think globally, I think there's absolutely opportunity and a really strong desire to bring overseas talent into a business. I've
yeah,
a friend who actually runs a VA business, and they're extremely busy at the moment
yeah,
because the cost of having people locally in Australia or
yeah,
in the US or UK is often prohibitive, and there's tremendous talent in, the sort of your key offshore areas, your Philippines, your India,
yeah.
Indonesia as well. So I think
Mm,
there's a real place for them in scaling businesses because I think you have the
mm.
opportunity to sort of upscale and down the vagaries of your own business.
So besides the monetary aspect of hiring a good talent at a lower price, is there anything else that a founder should look at outsourcing rather than hiring someone internally?
Yes, I think if a founder is building and just needs
Mm,
certain pieces of work to be completed, but doesn't sort of foresee long term need, then I think there's some great opportunity to bring talent in from that perspective as well. As I said,
mm,
tremendous skills and experience in some of the regions.
mm.
Yeah, as I said, I know multiple companies and multiple founders and startups here who use overseas talent for their businesses
Yeah.
and swear by them for all the work that they do. So yeah,
So, Matt, we're almost to the end of the podcast. I'll just ask you one
wow,
quick
so
one before
quick.
I let you go. Yes, thank you so much. You answered the questions really well and very precisely. So, that was amazing. And I think this is going to be very useful. It's very useful for me as well because I am also in the process of scaling my team and hiring more people. So, a lot of the questions I asked you were going to help me out as well. I was a bit selfish over there.
No,
So,
happy
yes,
to
thank
help.
you for that. Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of my audience who are founders who are scaling their startups are going to learn a lot from this. Some I know in US who want to outsource it, even that is going to be helpful for them. So yes, thank you so much. But yeah, before I let you go, one final question would be, what kind of shifts do you see in recruitment happening over the next 5 years, given Web 3.0 was last year, the hype of it was last year, then now there is AI. So where do you see recruitment going, outsourcing going in the next 5 years?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's conversations that we seem to be having more and more in the talent space.
Hmm.
Certainly, I run outside of my day job. I run the largest talent community in Australia, the Melbourne Talent Meetup,
Hmm.
and we often sort of have discussions about where things are going next. And I think within the talent space, I think we're all comfortable with the fact that AI is going to have more and more of an impact, and we will see large parts of recruitment being automated. I think it's really important that anybody who is within the space needs to make sure they upskill and they continue to keep their skills relevant, more so than ever before, really. I think in terms of the industry as a whole, skills-based hiring over credentials is probably going to be the big one. Degree requirements are already being dropped across industries, which is, I think, a positive thing. Qualified by experience
Hmm.
a lot more. I think more structured, data-driven processes will become standard, even in small teams, partly driven by accessibility to better and probably cheaper tools.
Yeah.
And it feels like the volume of applications is going to continue to increase because AI makes it easier to apply. And I think, I'm really interested to see what the stats look like in the
Hmm.
next sort of 2 to 3 years. Because as I said, I fully agree that we're in a stage where, yes, you could flick off 50 applications in a morning rather than sort of writing individually now, and it's so much easier to do that. So I think we need to have the technology to sort of keep up with that demand, because
Hmm.
talent teams are becoming smaller and have been smaller. So the volume of applications is kind of overwhelming a lot of those teams, which has an
Yeah.
impact on the quality of the candidate experience, and then that then has an impact on the quality um, of perception of the organization in the industry. I think one thing we know about Gen Z and Gen Alphas is that if they have a bad experience, they're going to tell everybody. They're going to tell the internet. They're going to tell the world. And I think
Yeah.
going to continue to have this negative spiral if organizations can't get on top of those kind of things. So I think softer skills will be really important. I think the talent
Hmm.
industry, talent acquisition, the skill set will continue to evolve. We've seen over the last 3 to 4 years that there has been a real blurring between talent acquisition, HR, onboarding,
Hmm.
retention. And I think
Yeah.
that will continue as well, Chris. Yeah. So it's going to be a really interesting time. It feels like a privilege to be around working in a time when there is so much change.
Yeah.
And I'm really, really excited to see what the future holds.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I guess you're kind of at the front of the change because you have so much of experience and now you have access to all the technology. So you'll be one of the front leaders kind of implementing that change or shaping the direction. So that's amazing. Nice place to be in. So
Let's hope
finally,
so.
Matt,
Yeah.
yes, yes, absolutely. So Matt, finally, if there is any founder who wants to make a change in his or her recruitment process this quarter, what should that be?
Yeah, I feel like I'm banging the drum on this one, Chris, but I think it's write a scorecard before you open your next role. It doesn't have to be detailed, just one page.
Yeah.
What does success look like in the first 90 days? What are 3 to 5 things you're going to assess? I think
Mm.
from there, that's your real the base of your base. Share it with anybody who's going to be involved in the process. Get them bought in, get feedback, iterate on that. I think that single change will immediately improve the quality of your decisions, of your hiring outcomes, but also your candidate experience as well. Because I think you'll be much clearer
Mm.
when you go into an interview exactly what you're looking for, and that will come across to the candidate as well. The conversation will be more productive. It won't deviate around things. Let's just have a conversation and see what happens, because that happens so much. So
Yeah.
you could be really clear about exactly what you need and what you're looking for in the interview. You can be a lot more sort of laser focused. I think everything else builds from that point.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you so much, Matt, for joining us. It was amazing having you on the show. I hope you enjoyed the questions and you had a good time as well.
You asked some wonderful questions, and you really got me thinking about this. So yes, as I said, hopefully there's some good value in there. And as I said, I think it's an exciting time to be part of startup businesses, and I'm
Yeah,
excited to see where you go with Marketing Rizz. It sounds
thank
like a
you.
really, really noble project. And as I said, yeah, scorecards. That's all I can say.
Amazing. And if someone wants you to build a scorecard for them or wants to work with you, can you tell us a bit about how can they connect with you, a bit about how you can help a founder, and a bit about Scalar before you leave?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I'm on the usual socials. So LinkedIn, linkedin.com, Matt Woodard. So happy to connect on there. So my big focus is working with businesses who um, just don't really understand, or just haven't quite got to the point where they have that clarity around exactly what they're looking for in the recruitment process. So either they can't afford to use agencies, they don't see that there's
Hmm.
enough of a pipeline to be able to justify an internal recruitment person joining, but they know they have a problem, and then they know they have a quality or a consistency problem that they need to fix. So someone like myself could come in, even on a fractional basis, sort of help
Fair
create
enough.
that structure, help embed it, and help remove the CEOs and the business and the leaders as the bottleneck. Often in a small business, CEOs the bottleneck, and just to remove that sort of dependence is really, really important. So that, and then identifying and hiring the right people for that stage of the journey. As I said, it's critical to get the right people on and work with the business to understand what that future proof looks like as well. Because as you say, if a
Beautiful.
business is scaling at pace, then 6 months time, they might not be the right people after all.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Lovely, man. Thank you so much. I'll drop in the link to your website and your LinkedIn in the description of the video on YouTube. So anyone wants to connect with you, they can connect with you from there. So thanks again, Matt. I won't keep you much longer. It was lovely having you, and I hope you enjoyed the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers.